so embarrassing. I can't. This is so embarrassing. But
it's not embarrassing. Feelings are
feelings are good, but this is so public.
Hi everyone, welcome back to After Broadway, the podcast where we deep dive into anything and everything musical theater. I'm Tara.
I'm Stefania.
And in today's episode, I feel like we've been putting this one off for a long time because we weren't emotionally ready to talk about it. And I still don't know if we're emotionally ready to talk about it. But here we are. Today, we're talking about Merrily We Roll Along. Now, Steph's holding her playbill.
I am. Where's yours, Tara?
And mine had to be removed from my wall. So this should say something to you about how this episode might go. I had never put something up so fast, ever.
To preface this, at intermission, we were so moved. We rose from our seats straight to the merch line, and we bought the little like Polaroid or photo strip magnets.
Anyone that's watching on YouTube, we are holding up.
We're holding them. These were $15 American. And we also bought, oh my god, we're reversed, the little enamel pins that say Merrily We Roll Along in the little like label maker font. Those were $10 American.
The other day, I was like, do I need the $80 old friend sweatshirt?
No, I'm telling you right now, Tara, you don't. You don't get it.
If it went on discount, I would buy it.
Sure, but it's not going on discount. Maybe after, I think that might need to be like a Broadway flea kind of find.
I don't know that I feel like that'd be a hot item. People would want that.
Maybe they'll just, whatever's left over at the end of the run, they'll like autograph and auction off for charity or something.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll get a discounted one of those.
No. So this is how many months after now? We saw this in November, so
like five-ish months.
We're 5 months removed. We're still pretty emotional about it. Mm-hmm. And I feel like this is going to be a long episode, and I feel like there's going to be some tears on this episode. So buckle up. What was your relationship to Merrily We Roll Along before you saw it?
So I was super familiar with the name of the show. I knew it was a very famous flop. Listeners of this podcast know I am like a Stephen Sondheim fan. But this specific show, I'd heard some of the songs before, and I'd tried to make my way through the original cast recording, but I'd always found it a bit of a hard listen, I think in part due to the structure of the show in that it runs backwards. And so I never really connected with it before seeing it. So I could have hummed, Merrily We Roll Along, the song, or some of it would have sounded familiar, especially because it sounds familiar also because it is like so Sondheim in music and in lyric and in rhythm and melody. But to be honest, I really had a very cursory understanding of the show and had maybe listened to the songs twice. And so I really felt like I was going in very blind. We had tried to get tickets to the New York Theater Workshop production, but those were a really hot ticket. I was in that waiting room. I was in that line working for it. And then also we obviously saw the press tour that the cast had gone on back in the fall, but still I don't like going in. I was very fresh for what I was about to receive, if you will. What about you, Tara?
Same as you. I think I had listened to that cast recording maybe like twice through.
Which cast recording? The original cast recording, or there's definitely another one.
It's the one that's got the blue with the like clock.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not the original.
That might be a different one. Let's see what year that one is. This is IMDb, not Spotify.
But yeah, I found it very hard to relate to, connect to, because I had said this on a previous episode, probably our year in review. There's a lot
not to interrupt, the one with the clock, the blue one, is 1994. So okay. I wonder if that's a London one.
I have since heard the original cast recording, and then obviously like
which
this
is
newer
quite
cast.
Different.
Yes, and then this new cast recording I've listened to many times since seeing it, but yeah, I couldn't connect to it because there's a lot of context that's missing on this cast recording because there is quite a bit of dialogue that I didn't know until we see it. It fills in those like missing pieces of the cast recording. So agree.
And also because you're hearing what's last first, you're like, wait, what's going on? Or at least that was how it was for me.
Yeah. I also knew that it was like a famous flop, but I didn't really like look into it that much. I just knew that it was like sometimes like not worst musical, but a worst musical in terms of like it didn't do very well when it was on Broadway. And then what episode did we do with Patrick Flynn where we watched Six by Sondheim in preparation? What was that episode about?
Oh,
it was
man.
a Stephen Sondheim episode.
His Patreon series, they do original cast at the movies, and that was in, what was it, January 2021, something like that.
We were all like, yeah, I wasn't even living here. We were like Zooming, so yeah.
I think it was a long time ago. January 2021. It's on his Patreon, so less listeners, but yeah, we watched Six by Sondheim, which I had seen before, but I had seen it like at a different journey in my musical theater love, if that makes sense. So watching it again at that time was different.
Yeah, I feel like I watched it because I knew that we had to talk about it, and I was like not paying attention, but I wasn't like super connected to it. I'm sure if I watched it again now, I would feel very differently about it. I think the reason I knew so much about it before we had talked to him was because like that opening doors number is done by like Jeremy Jordan, Laura Osnes, Darren Criss, somebody else. Or maybe not.
America Ferrera.
The three of them. America Ferrera, yes. So there was like name recognition to that. So that's how I had heard about it the first time. But yeah, we walked in pretty blind to this. And I would, if you are seeing this production between now and July, if you were seeing any production of Merrily, I would recommend not listening to it. I would just recommend that you know that this is in reverse, but don't really look up too much of it because I think that's why we absorbed it the way that we did.
Yeah, I think there's many, many reasons why it was so impactful to us at that time. But I have to tell a funny story in that I literally was so unfamiliar in that they're singing Now You Know, I'm crying, I'm having a moment, and the lights go down and a man gets up and starts walking out of the theater. And I'm like, how rude of that man to just stand up in the middle of the show. It was intermission. I literally didn't know. Because it had gone so quickly.
It had gone so quickly, but I also feel like you were like in a different world at that point.
I was so focused and I wasn't, and a lot of times during shows, I am very guilty. I am a program reader.
Reading a song list, yes.
You will see me if the show is dark.
The theater with Steph,
the theater's dark.
I can't show you on the Merrily playbill, but I'll show you on the Les Mis playbill. She's like this. Anyone that's like looking, it's like nose is inside of the playbill.
Here's the trick. You need to like tilt it to the stage to try and get the lights up. Sometimes I'm really bad. Sometimes I'll be like phone to the thing to like really. I just need to know. I need to know where we're going.
But not for this. You didn't.
No,
right?
I really didn't. So then when it became the Act 1 finale, which unbeknownst to me, and someone was leaving, and I was like, how dare that man get up in the middle of this show? But it was fully the end of Act 1. It was fully the end of Act 1. It just raced by. It was so propulsive. And by not being so, like, caught up in every single minute detail of knowing what comes next, what comes next, and allowing myself to be carried along. I had a wonderful experience. If you didn't get it, we loved this production of this show. We had an amazing time. We were so moved by it.
Let's go back in time a little bit. So
okay.
You talked about the New York Theater Workshop, but you were in a waiting room again, and so was I for when tickets went on sale for Merrily.
Yeah.
I was at work.
Working from home.
I was at the office. It was the little man that just walks on the virtual queue line the whole time. And it was so stressful. We knew that we wanted to go on like Remembrance Day weekend for Canadians, Veterans Day weekend for Americans, because it's just easier for us when there's like a holiday weekend. Actually, it's not, because I didn't have a day off, so I don't know why we did that.
I think we accidentally picked that day. That was a huge mistake on our part. I would not recommend going on a holiday weekend, personally.
As I was saying it, I was loud. I was like, I didn't have a day off, and neither did you. So why did we do
days
that?
Off.
Okay, no, I'm not sure why we did that.
I honestly think it was an accident. I would not recommend going on a holiday weekend. But I am grateful we did, because obviously understudies are amazing, but Lindsay Mendez is out for the next 2 weeks. And
yes,
we had such wonderful luck that whole weekend with casts and everyone being in the whole time. So
yeah,
we got to see that trio together.
And then once we got in, we bought those tickets immediately. We were rear orchestra.
On the aisle.
On the aisle.
It's at the Hudson,
which is key.
Which is very small.
It's at the Hudson. Yeah. And then, so we had set out, because we had spent so much money on those tickets, to average down for the rest of the trip, which we did successfully do that.
Everything else was rush or under 30.
Yeah. So we saw this on a Saturday. I was saying this to you the other day with Sunset Boulevard, which we're also going to see that, about ATG tickets. This was also an ATG ticket, event, which I believe is because it's from London. This was like a transfer, not really a transfer, but like a transfer of this production that was in London like 11 years ago.
ATG are one of the producers, and also own the Hudson Theater Right. But what that meant, because I was thinking about this today,
is that if you go to the bar, there are no show cups. You get your drinks in legit glasses. So we were like classy. It was so classy there. Yeah, we were like, wow, should we splurge and get a glass of wine? We're just like getting into the moment.
5-ounce glass away.
in the like real wine glasses.
It's hard actually, because then you're like, what do I do with this?
Just put it on the floor. Yeah. But yeah, we were like, we've already spent this much money. Like, let's make the most of this whole experience and like do it up. And yeah, like from the moment that Overture hit to the end of that show, I've literally never had a theatrical experience that I remember like that in my life.
Hitting you emotionally in that way.
And I don't know that I ever will again.
I know we've talked about this, but I would be worried about ever seeing this show in another production again, because this was like I felt this was so special, like a special, and I also think it kind of maybe hit us at the right, sometimes things hit you at like the right moment in your life, like we're maybe in the middle age range of the ages that you watch the characters go through, like maybe like slightly younger than the actors, but they go from 20 to 40, and we're really like smack dab right in the middle of that. So I think, and also, seeing a show about friendship with such a close friend, like I think part of it is just the circumstance.
We checked so many boxes.
Part of it is just like sometimes things hit you at like the perfect exact moment in your life, and I think that was part of that about this show. But after I left, I was like, I don't know if I can ever see this again, because everything else after this will be a disappointment, especially like now knowing it so well, and having had that catharsis of just crying from beginning to end. I don't think any other version or production of this show will ever measure up. I worry that it won't.
But I would also say that for this current production, I don't know that I could see this current production again. I know. Just because I think my expectations now are like astronomical. And that's sorry to every other musical that I've seen post Merrily. It's just like not. I feel like it was funny when we talked about this a little teeny tiny bit in our year in review, and you had talked about like your existential theater crisis. And it's just like, then you see something that's this good, and you're like, well, guess nothing else will ever live up to this ever.
Sometimes things just are that good, and it's a combination of the show and the work that's been done to it, but also the production, I think, is really well done and so simplistic. And I also think, the perfect chemistry of the cast that they have in this show right now, it's a perfect storm, I think, that's made it a hit right now. And I don't know, maybe if it all didn't gel together, it would still be a hit, but I think I think I don't know, I think just every element of this works. Like, I think there are things you nitpick for sure in the show,
I look past.
but I just don't think it's important or relevant, to be honest. Like
yeah.
Is it a perfectly written show? No.
No, but would I maybe
care.
say that this to me is like a perfect musical? Yeah. Yeah, I would.
Yeah, like, and I also think, you know, we spend so much time listening to cast recordings, and we talked about this, how it was hard to get into this cast recording before seeing it. Like, theater is meant to be seen. Theater is not meant to be experienced in any other way, and theater is meant to be experienced in that way. Yeah. In preparation for today's episode, I want to do my show and tell. I have my Finishing the Hat. Steve Sondheim Finishing the Hat. I have my box set.
It's been brought out previously in our Into the Woods episode, possibly our company episode.
I don't know if I'm not sure if I had it when we did our company episode.
All right.
Maybe I did. I think I did.
I don't remember.
You know what? Not on a full tangent, but remember when I got it?
Yes.
We picked it up at the Eaton Center. You dropped me off. I ran in.
We were going to Jake Epstein.
We're going to Jake Epstein. It was the weekend after I had written my professional exam. So it was May 2022. And I saw Company in July 2022. So I did have it, actually.
I was also annoyed because I had this in a cart for you for months. And then you're like, guess what I got? It was like, ugh.
Well, I had asked for it for Christmas.
Gotta find a new birthday present.
Full backstory is I had asked for it for Christmas the Christmas before, which was Christmas 2021. But I started putting my Christmas list together in September, because that's when my birthday is. So it's whatever. Before Mr. Sondheim died.
Yeah.
And then whoever was buying the gifts got a little lazy and didn't try to buy it till after he died. And it was nowhere to be found. Couldn't find it. So this one was actually printed in 2022. It was printed after he died.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if that's noted anywhere in here except for, oh yes, it has the year of his death in the bio, which the previous versions didn't. Anyway, so yes, so I went through and I looked through the Merrily chapter, and I kind of listened along to the cast recording and just followed along and read the little anecdotes about songs, just to try and hear his insight and what he was thinking at the time and the inspiration for the show, because I do think this is an interesting one in that, because it was a flop at the time, and I think it really impacted his relationship with writing and producing musicals on Broadway, and disillusioned him in some way. And I think it's an interesting turning point, and I think that's also why it ends this book. It is a good stopping point, but I also think there's a reason why it ends this book. It ends kind of his collaboration with Hal Prince for a long time. It's an interesting moment to look at, and I think, two other favorites of mine from Stephen Sondheim are Company, which was 10-ish years before this, and Into the Woods, which is 10-ish years after this. And I think it's an interesting midpoint, especially because it has had so much reworking in that time since.
So we haven't officially said here, but this production that's currently on Broadway is 42 years after the original time that it was on Broadway. And I think we've kind of had this conversation off and on, but not for real, of why does this version work? What do you think it is, other than everything that we said about the cast, obviously, and for us it was time and place, but what do you actually think about it is about this story that resonates with people now more than it ever did before?
I think it's interesting, that original production. I think the original goal of the show, the original reason why they even started writing it, was because they wanted to do something, they said, with kids, and they cast these teenagers in the show and built this show around these teenagers. And the conceit was that you would have these teenagers playing 40-year-old adults at the start, and then you would watch them slowly become their real age throughout the show.
Also, just to say, you can legitimately watch this on the documentary Best Worst Thing That Ever Could Have Happened. It's a Merrily We Roll Along documentary where you can see this legitimately play out, what Steph is describing.
A documentary with the rehearsal process. Have you seen the interviews with Lonnie Price talking about how they found the tapes? Have you seen him talk about how he found the tapes? How they were just searching. I think it's in when they like find them and open the boxes in the documentary. But crazy that they had all this footage and no one knew where it was, and people are just like, putting random search terms.
Like at that time that they recorded all of this.
I literally think not every day, but all the time about that company documentary where they recorded them recording the cast recording and how it was meant to be this ongoing series of them documentaries about them recording cast recordings, but they never did another one. Mm-hmm. And it's insane that they captured one so important, if that makes sense. On that, it could have been a random one. It could have been anything, but they captured one so like pivotal or so influential. I don't even know what was around. Like, I'm not thinking of anything else at that time, but they could have captured anything, and they captured that one. And I think it's crazy they have that footage. I think it's crazy they have this footage of all this rehearsal room and the casting process and the stuff of these kids before their careers even began. Like a lot of them were in high school. Like
Jason Alexander is like the star of this document. Like he's not the star of this. He plays the producer character, but he's like the most well-known name in today's culture. Yeah.
So funny. I know that documentary does kind of turn into a Jason Alexander documentary at this.
It does. There's like pictures of him getting like noticed at like a deli because he was George in Seinfeld, and it's like, this is what my life was after Merrily. I'm like, this isn't really part of the rehearsal process, but like, okay, here we are.
Okay, back to what I was saying after this tangent. The conceit was casting kids and watching them become their real age, kind of like de-age over time of the show. And I think part of having these super, super young people playing these characters lends a sort of, and again, I wasn't there, I don't know, a slightly amateurish feel to this show. I feel like it could potentially feel like kids playing dress up, and even they spoke about, I think it was intentional on the part of them at the time, but it didn't translate in the way they wanted like that first party scene to be kind of a kid's idea of what Hollywood would be, and it made it feel a little goofy instead of what it does now.
From what I understand in the documentary, it was more of a Hal Prince push for this storyline than a Sondheim. He was kind of at a place in his career when he was like, okay, I've tried this, I've tried that, but like, what about kids? And the way that they're in that rehearsal room, there's a really like interesting part when it's like an interview with Steven and Hal, and they're saying how like, as the show goes on, you kind of forget that that's like a teenager, and now you're, which is weird because they're going in reverse, so they're actually getting down to their younger self. Yeah. So it's like they got lost in these performances, which like I understand, but I don't think casting young or that young is correct.
It's hard at the beginning of the show because by the end of the show, you've already hopefully bought into these characters and these relationships, and you're willing to overlook more. But at the beginning of the show, you're kind of like, show me what you got, show me what you have. You have a little bit less benefit of the doubt at the beginning of the show. So when it already starts off so jarring in that way, I think it kind of takes you out of it, and you're a little less likely to go with it. Whereas when you're at the end of the show, you're 2.5, almost 3 hours into your journey with the characters, and you're like, okay, they're not 22, but I'm gonna go with it right now. It's fine because I love these people. I love these characters so much. My heart is with them in a way it's not right at the beginning of the show.
Agree.
They also did, a funny thing where everyone was getting confused about who all the characters were, because again, it's not linear, where they put everyone in like t-shirts where it was like ex-wife or like enemy.
Which uses the font of the old friend sweatshirt that they're currently selling as merch. So like it would say
like, that also
producer,
looks really amateurish.
it would say best pal, it would say it looks like
a theater production, like a community theater.
One thing that I forgot to say, no, it's not, but also one thing I forgot to say at the top of this episode, which I know you also agree with and have seen, the only other connection that I have to Merrily is they perform it in Lady Bird, and that's what this feels like.
Exactly. They're wearing like solid color t-shirts in that production.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Does Beanie Feldstein in that play Mary in
She must.
The
and
Lady
she's playing
Bird?
it again.
I don't know, and she's playing Mary in the movie. Yeah, I forgot about that. And then at the end when the teacher's like, they didn't understand. They didn't understand. He's like, they didn't get it.
No.
Also, that original production had that framing device of starting at a high school graduation where Frank, like an older Frank, was going back to be like a guest speaker to speak about his success, but then kind of is, depressed and alone. And then at the end of the show, it comes back to that. And in all subsequent productions, that framing device has been cut, gone. That song is completely gone. Even the original opening song where I flipped to Sweeney Todd, sorry. That original opening song, not opening song, but the original first song of the story, which is now that Frank used to be like rich and happy because it was more of a kid's idea of adults and Hollywood and what it is. And they're like, no, I think we actually just need to play this more straight. We just need to kind of take you in and introduce you instead of being so high concept. I do think the right casting choice is casting kind of in the middle of the age and having people who you could be like, no, they're 40, they're 22. And I think all three of like that main cast have that, in that it could be like, you could be any age, if you will.
Yeah. I agree. Should we talk about this cast?
Yeah, let's talk about this cast.
Okay, so I feel like let's just get into these three right off the top. If you've listened to us for the last 3 months since we've been like through year in review, also Tony nominations, like there is not a better trio on Broadway right now. Jonathan Groff, Lindsay Mendez, Daniel Radcliffe. They seem to be best friends on and off stage.
They're telling us
they're good actors.
They're campaigning for that Tony. Did you Lindsay Mendez was on Seth Meyers, and she's talking about she's pregnant, she's having a baby, which also, we absolutely love. She's able to continue, working until she's able. Like the show has accommodated her with that. That is like a somewhat new thing in theater. But she said, this baby is hearing Uncle John and Uncle Dan's voices every day. And I was like, oh, wow, maybe they are friends. Or maybe they're lying to us. But I don't care. I don't care.
I mean, I think all three are great actors, but I just don't think you can fake chemistry like that. There, you can get a very, very small glimpse of, on the Merrily YouTube channel, they have old friends where they start in the recording studio and then they show some clips of on stage. There's a moment that I am obsessed with. It's at the very end when Jonathan and Daniel are arms around each other, and then they're all there to put their pinkies together, and Jonathan calls Lindsay over with his pinky finger, and I'm just like, oh, you guys are so it's so real, which I think is why it hurt so much at the end. Wow, we're kind of time has happened here, and I feel like this is where I'll be glassy-eyed for the rest of the episode.
Not to move away from cast, but I think another thing that I think works so well about this production is, Tara, what would you say that the core theme of this show is?
Friendship.
That's when I walked away, that's also what I felt. And again, that's something that in my life at this time is also, maybe we're looking for that, but a lot of other interpretations have been, it's about the pitfalls of fame, it's about selling out, and that's absolutely 100% there. But I think centering the friendship of this show, I think this production really chooses and explicitly is telling you the most important thing about this show is the relationship between these three people, and then the relationships out and the way that they have impacted each other's lives is the most important part. Is I also think what makes this production work so well. Obviously, a cautionary tale about fame, blah, 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 got it. It's there. But I think maybe other productions focused maybe slightly more on that element than the like core friendship element.
But I also think that this is something that the cast believes, because I watched today the young writers talk back after a performance of Merrily, moderated by Benj Pasek, and Jonathan said, you know, like, I've never related so much to material before, so I feel like every night it's like easy to, I'm paraphrasing, but like get into this character because like it's so relatable to me. He's like, and that's why I think audiences love it so much, is because they can see themselves within these different characters. I mean, here's the thing, like, it's a dumb thing to say, but like, everybody has friends, whether it's good relationships, bad relationships, mediocre relationships, like everybody's got something. I'll also consider like acquaintances part of this, like they're part of that storyline too. And just with the fact that like you as an individual going to see the show has a relationship with some group of people, like, I would be surprised if you couldn't relate to that. I think there is a moment in this show that is so relatable to everybody. I think there are moments in this show that are like more relatable to like our lives at this current stage of our lives than maybe like my parents would be able to relate to it. But I don't think that's to say that like you couldn't feel anything for it. There's literally like, anytime I've seen a review, it's like, if you have a friend, this show is for you.
if you've ever had a friend,
if you've ever had a relationship that's like someone that you consider like, I don't know, anything, like this show is for you. So I do think that this cast and this show, and maybe that's with also like,
not everyone is a famous writer, let's say.
Exactly. And maybe that's a lot to do with,
but everyone has had a friend, everyone has lost a friend, everyone has, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite part about art, what I think makes great art, is when it reflects back, you know, the world, reflects back onto you. When you're watching something and then you're able to take it and you're doing something in your regular life and you think, oh, that was just like this, or this reminds me of this moment, like when it holds up a mirror to you. And also my favorite kind of art is watching like people be humans, if that makes sense. Like watching regular people in ordinary or sometimes extraordinary situations and watching them make decisions and see, you know, what they would do and how they would handle it and how they would relate to different people. And I think, you know, those are things that I already love, and I saw that in this show.
Yeah. I feel like let's stick with this. We'll go back to the past in a little bit because we're like here.
No.
But like, I think that's also like another thing that's so great about this production is the simplicity of it. And there's very minimal set. We're like kind of in an apartment.
Act 1 has like no set changes. We spin a wheel.
Yeah, the only thing that really happens is there's like this circular art piece that changes based on the time periods. That's all that really is.
Remember when it switches to like the nautical like yacht moment? I was like, that's dumb. He's getting on the boat. And they flip it to like a life raft.
There's also like a staircase, and then there's like the band who lives like at the top of this like apartment building. And when the show starts, the windows are up for the overture, and then as the overture ends, they like close the blinds, so you're now like in Frank's house type thing. I feel like while we're here on friendship, like let's discuss this like theme throughout the show. So as we've said, it's in reverse, but we haven't really said like what happened.
Tara,
so
are you going to give us a 67 plot summary?
No, 60 second.
60 seconds.
60 seconds. It's basically just the, like, to me, it's the like, not the destruction of a friendship, but it is the destruction of a friendship over 20 years. And
but told in reverse.
But told in reverse, and how people's lives can get in the way of things that were once the only thing in their life. And I feel like I have different viewpoints on this because I don't necessarily think that like dissolving a friendship is bad if it's necessary. And I feel like for this storyline, it might have been necessary to dissolve that friendship because there was just so much going on in their lives that I don't know that they could have ever gone on and felt the way that they felt about each other when they first met.
They had really like hurt each other's feelings. Yeah, I don't disagree. Like, I think, it's not always, I don't know, you shouldn't necessarily always fight to preserve a friendship if it's not serving you anymore. But I do think it's still very sad to lose something like that. The moment that made me really cry, I'm gonna cry. I'm crying
right now also.
Right now. The moment that made me really cry, many moments, but the moment that made me really cry is in the first scene of the show, which is at the end of the friendship. We're at a party and it's at Frank's house and Mary is there, but Charlie is not there. You feel his absence, which is maybe a criticism I have for the show, but also like talk about this later. Like, you feel his absence in this. Okay, what I'll say, my criticism here is it's hard to feel his absence because you don't know him yet, if that makes sense.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, should he be in the first? Anyway, doesn't matter. That's a big criticism I have for that is a criticism I have for the show. But someone, an up and coming writer goes to Frank and says, "What advice do you have? What advice do you have for a young writer?" And Frank says, "Don't write what you know, write what you know."
And you're like, his head.
Right, and you're just like, okay, whatever. But then,
just to illuminate that a little more, he says it's a throwaway like parody line when he says it to this writer because like, it doesn't. At the time, it doesn't mean anything. And he says with the actions, don't write what you know, and he touches his head, write what you know, and then he touches his heart. And you're like, oh, that's weird at the beginning. Yet here we are discussing this, and I can barely get this word out, Yeah,
you just go past it. It's a moment. The way that, anyway. And then you get to the end of the show, right? I'm trying to anyway, you get to the end of the show, and it's the beginning of this friendship, and you're on the rooftop and they're watching Sputnik and they're about to sing Our Time, and they're talking about writing, and Charlie says to Frank, about his writing, don't write what you know, write what you know. And the audience, I gasp because this is so embarrassing. I can't. This is so embarrassing. But
it's not embarrassing. Feelings are feelings.
Feelings are good, but this is so public. And I gasped because I was like, wow, he has carried what he said to him through his whole life, and they're not friends.
And they're no longer
anymore.
friends.
They're they don't speak anymore. They have anger between them, but he changed who he was as a person. Anyway, let's pull ourselves together. I think I'm actually going to be good now.
You just needed to get that out right off the top.
I think it's good.
Right off the top, we're 40 minutes in.
Anyway. And I think it is interesting that the show explores so much about how the people you surround yourself with change your life in small ways and little ways. You ask for their opinion on something, and you take that opinion and you do something because they said, I think you should do this, or you should, a throwaway thing someone said to you one time, and you think about it all the time. Yeah. And just the people in your life, they impact you. Anyway, we're all good.
I think it's also interesting because right after that first party scene leads to, it's one of my favorite lines. It's absolutely devastating, but I also feel like it's real. Mary is singing about how she wishes that their friendship was the way that it was. And Charlie says to her, it's not the three of us anymore. It's one and one and one. And I think that's very relatable. I think it's also very sad. But I think that Charlie's character, unlike Mary, looks at a lot of their friendship from a more realistic point of view of, I have my own life, you have your own life, he has his own life, and we need to live it for ourselves first and not for each other. Because she's in this whole moment of I still love him. Could there be something between us? It's been 20 years of her in love with him, and he's the only person that sees this as it's now a transactional friendship. There's also business with friends involved, which maybe don't do. Here very we messy. Are, but maybe don't do. There's no money involved with us, but when money gets involved, I think that also changes a lot of people. So I think that's an interesting theme too. Another, I think, devastating moment, I will also say, I think it's pretty obvious, but like I've never cried harder than I ever like have at this show, is
we had to pull ourselves together before meeting Daniel Radcliffe at the stage door. We had to gather ourselves.
Also, I should have said earlier, but like, if you're planning to see this production, like, don't listen to this episode. This is full spoilers. So sorry. I'm like, we're giving away all of the secrets here. There's a moment, and again, this is like how I think wonderfully this show plays with the concept of time. When you learn throughout the course of going in reverse how much Mary does love Frank and how she always wished for a relationship. And again, another moment at the very end in that scene before they sing the last song, they talk to Mary and he says, that's the woman I'm going to marry someday. And I think I
like a throwaway joke, like a throwaway, he just makes a little joke. The audience gasped because
I legitimately burst into tears. It was like, it's such a nothing line, but it affected me so deeply because I watched her go on this journey.
They've been sowing the seeds the whole time, and that kind of just unlocked maybe why she felt that way, or, you know, how her life was put on that trajectory. He said something kind of jokingly to her one time after she complimented him, and that changed the trajectory of her life. Like, as far as we know, as far as we see in the story, she never got married. Like, we don't see her in a serious relationship, and you only see flashes of these people's lives. But, you know, Frank is married 2 times, on his way to a 3rd time by the end of by the end of this friendship, and Mary has kind of been like holding on to this, waiting for nothing really, because of this first interaction on the roof, and like that just like set her life on a different course. Crazy.
And while we're talking about time, I think something that's so interesting to me is the reprise, because it means reprise in this world means something completely different than a reprise would mean typically. Absolutely. So in this show, the song, tell me what the song is called. It's on the tip of my tongue.
Not
Katie Rose Clark. Not a Day Goes By.
Not a Day Goes By. Not a Day Goes By. Yes.
The song Not a Day Goes By is sung first by Katie Rose Clark while she is getting a divorce from Frank. That scene also destroyed me. When Jonathan Groff was on the ground, like screaming for his kid. Destroyed. I'm not a parent. I'm not anything. But like, I was just like, oh my God, like heart ripped out. So she sings this song, and the lyrics in that song are pretty like devastating, pretty hard hitting. And then you realize later, Mary sings Not a Day Goes By reprise when
They both sing it. Like, it's their wedding vows to each other. Like, Beth and Frank, it's their wedding vows to each other. And then Mary sings it along in this, like, sad way.
And it's just, like, that's the reverse in a real show. In a normal show, that the vows would be happening first, and the reprise would be Katie Rose Clark singing... What's her character's name? I can't even remember.
Beth is the character.
That's Beth singing her divorce to Frank. But in this show... Like, it hurts that much more when you realize that was their vows. It's so painful. This show is so painful.
Well, it makes the joyful moments painful, right? You don't get to experience them as true joy, because the second act of the show, like, they're happy. They're having a good time. Their show
are partying.
Their show's a hit. They're, like, getting married. They're, in that, like, a time of youth where, everything feels possible, and they're just hustling and working and having fun. So they're having a great time, and you as the audience everything they're doing is referring back to something devastating that happened in Act 1, and you're finally putting together all the pieces. And so they're having a great time, and you're like, oh God.
And I'm not.
I think about, the song to me, what's the title? Not Now You Know.
Growing Up?
No, Good Thing Going. Good Thing Going. Where you hear in the second act, but you hear it in the overture, but you first hear Frank hum it at the beginning of Growing Up. You like, mm-hmm. and then you hear it next, kind of Gussie singing it at the Act 2 opener. It's
like
at
a
the
more
show.
like jazzy.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's this big band kind of style in the show, and then when you hear it the next time, they're playing it at this party, trying to get people interested in their show, and it's kind of this like embarrassing moment. And then you hear it again when they're first writing it in Opening Doors, and you've heard this melody, and you also hear it in the overture. You've heard this melody now 5 times throughout the show, and you get kind of all you get of it at first is memories, and then by the end you get what they were remembering. I wrote a note.
I was just going to say, while you're finding that note, I just think it's so interesting because so many people, they're like, one of their major critiques about Merrily as a whole property is the book. I actually think that, like, we should be applauding this, like, exploration of time that has really never been done before. And it's going to be messy because you're going in reverse of people's lives. I think it's such a genius way to write a show about such a breakup, for lack of a better term, because you as an audience member have so much work to do in this show.
Like,
you need to
excavate.
pay attention to those
Like
little moments. Yeah.
Like digging it up. You're like, what happened?
Yeah. You have to figure out like how these pieces all fit this puzzle. And then when you get to the end and our time ends with the like little bits of that Merrily interlude again, and it's like, oh, we could start this whole thing over and now go in the true order that it's supposed to be. And I'm just like, let's do it. Let's go again. I'm ready.
From the top. It's chilling when they just keep repeating like me and you, and it gets like almost not sinister. Sinister's not the right word, but like so intense, and then it's like, I don't know what the instrument is, but they're just like, duh.
But can I tell you,
they do it like too many times, almost too many times, and you're just kind of like holding your breath.
Listening to this cast recording, seeing this on stage, and then listening to bits and pieces of that in that documentary, it's way more hopeful in the original sound-wise than it is in this. I find this ends a little more ominous, a little more dark. It's very like bittersweet, right? To kind of show you that like, if we did start this over at the top, we'd be at the end of the friendship and everyone's like having a horrible life. Like, they don't know what's coming for them. They don't know what life is going to bring them, but we do. The people on stage, the characters on stage, anything is possible for them, but we know the path they're going to take, which what makes it tragic. Yeah. Okay, back to performances. We needed to get there because I feel like the theming needed to make its way through.
And also one more thing. I think in a show like this, the overture is like even more, well, one, it's one of the best overtures ever, but it's even more important because you're hearing these themes because of the way that the reprise structure works, that you hear almost the reprise first and then the original moment second. Yeah. That you need the overture to really like get those themes in your head so that they sound familiar to you already when they like pre-reprise them, essentially. So when Frank is like humming at the beginning of Growing Up, you've heard that section in the overture, so it feels familiar to you, and you recognize it as something that you should recognize instead of just a hum. Another song. Doing.
Yes, 100%. Okay, so let's start with the 3. Let's start with Jonathan Groff, who I believe is giving his best performance to date. I don't know.
And his pants are giving the best performance.
They're really tailored really well. He looks great.
Like 70s, like bell bottoms almost. Okay, go on.
He's also like not spinning as much as he normally does, or maybe we were just too far away.
Far back. Last time we saw him, the time before he was spitting, but we were in the second row last time. Yes, we were in the second last row this time.
Yes. I don't know. I really think that he is one of the reasons that this show is as good as it is. I think we've talked about this on a previous episode. Also, on episode release day, Tony nominations are tomorrow. So, like, fingers crossed for this. It's going to happen, but, like, fingers crossed anyway. He is perfectly cast for this. We were talking about it on Gatsby when we were talking about so miscast versus voice well
forward.
cast. Voice forward. Groff is...
Can't believe that episode's not even out yet, and we reference it.
It will be now.
We reference it all the time.
And he is not a voice forward performer.
Beautiful voice, but
gorgeous voice, but he's also a great actor. And I think there's so much to his like facial expressions in this show specifically. He's also one of the only characters. This was something that stuck out to me when we first saw it. He does not change. He wears the same outfit basically the entire
sometimes a jacket,
show,
but
which is just a really smart move for costuming to really show you that like this.
He's not leaving the stage very much either. Like he has no time. He has no time.
It's basically like this story is centered around this man's life and his friends.
Everything
which I
moves
think,
around him.
Yes, so I think it's really smart to keep him in that like white button down black pants, and then I think when we get younger, his sleeves like roll up slightly so that he's like young.
Yes.
We've talked about this like maybe off the mic. I'm not sure if we talked about it on the mic, but there are moments in this cast recording where we're like Tony Award, and I think that literally starts right off the top. It's when he yells "party," obviously.
Party. No, there's so many iconic moments when Lindsay yells "No pool."
Yeah,
trash.
That whole song.
They're doing iconic things.
Even the way that she sings. What do you do? I drink. No, really, I really drink. Her tone of voice, like. That song is amazing. That's such a great opening number. But yeah, I just really think that like and maybe because he is so invested in this show, he was so invested in the story, he relates so well to this that like I was so lost in his performance the entire time that it was like, oh, I know that's Jonathan Groff. I know he's a big deal, but he's Frank to me, and that's such a, I think, incredible achievement on his behalf to mask his celebrity and play this character.
I think to me what works so well about his casting is that Frank is not always a likable character.
He's the worst.
Right. So exactly. He's making choices and you're kind of not with him on a lot of them. But
I am crying with him though all the way through.
What I'm saying is Jonathan Groff has this almost innocence to him.
Yes.
That's just inherent. Even when you see him in interviews or
he's so sweet.
He'll say kind of out of pocket things, but then he'll just like smile and like giggle, and you're like, oh. I don't know. He was like raised in a farm on Pennsylvania. He has this very like this inherent sweetness, this innocence, this like big heart. I don't know this man, but that shines through this role, this character through like every time he speaks, even when he's saying like silly stuff or, something raunchy on an interview, there's this element of contrast in it. So when we're having him play this unlikable guy, but because of just the way he plays things and his face is so open all the time, he makes him just so likable. Like he makes up for that so easily in his performance. I think it's inherent to him. I don't think all actors can do this. I think it's his talent, but I also think it's just like from his core, he's able to just make everything seem sweeter. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, he humanizes the text that's written. And a perfect example of that is during Not a Day Goes By. This man has cheated on his wife. They have a kid. And I am sobbing for him. Why? Why am I sobbing for him? Because I've watched him all the way through. This is the song. It's like right before Now You Know, right? So right before Intermission.
Yeah. Not a Day Goes By.
So I've watched him lose a friend. I've watched him kind of go back in time a little bit and realize why that friendship was lost, which was due to him being the worst. And now we watch him cheat on his wife with this new woman twice, basically. And now I'm watching him at a courthouse get divorced, and I'm like, oh my God, I feel so bad for you. So maybe I'm the problem.
No, not the problem, but it's No, it I think in the wrong hands or in different hands, I think it's easy to just be like, yeah, I don't like that guy. Like, he gets what he gets what's coming to him. But I think Jonathan Groff, like, I think Frank is in such like good hands with Jonathan that you
and
never feel that way about him, to me.
To contrast that, we have Daniel Radcliffe playing Charlie, who I would say, as I said, like, Charlie is more voice of reason character out of the three of them. And Daniel is so believable in that character. I feel like he's playing himself. Again, another man that we do not know. Also a uber celebrity. And
so famous. Nicest man alive.
Oh my god, so nice. What did you say to him when we were at the stage door? You were like,
I said we were a puddle at the back.
He was like something of like, oh yeah, like all my friends and family, I tell them to like get prepared for this show.
He said I feel bad inviting friends and family because it's like, sorry.
Yeah.
So sad.
And
in his
not
accent.
once did I
he touched
was
my
I
phone
watching
for the selfie.
Not once when I was watching this show was I like, oh, that's Daniel Radcliffe. Like, it literally, I another person that like disappeared into that role. Obviously his standout moment is Franklin Shepherd Inc. But he also has such a sweet relationship with Mary that I feel like is kind of like a side storyline that you have to pay attention to, or you'll miss how much he puts her feelings first. Like, he's really, yes, they're in a trio, but like, if Frank is hurting Mary, he picks up on it and is like, what can I do to be by your side? Which, I don't know, it's just a very like sweet character. And then you find out that he meets like his wife in that final scene, and
you know, we needed to add some comedy.
Yeah. And he was someone that like, he really believed in his friendship and he believed in his friend's work and thought that their collaboration would work out for them, and it turned out to be the opposite.
You know, right at the end of their friendship, and in the interview he says, you know, I'm flipping for the lyric.
Is it the phone him, write him, stop him on the streets, you'll recognize him, he's the one going through his checkbook? Because that's a good one.
Right before that, in Franklin Shepherd Inc., it's like a dialogue moment. He said, listen, Frank does the money thing very well, and you know what? There are people who do it better, and Frank does the music thing very well, and you know what? No one does it better. He's so, you know, he's angry with him, he's very hurt, he's on this tirade on TV, and at the same time, he's like, he is the most talented person in the world at this. He's like, but also hate him.
Yeah. But I think he believed in him so much, which is why that scene, which is so early, like in their, not friendship, but like early enough in their friendship when the show does become a hit, they're so excited for each other. And then also their relationship in Opening Doors, just the way that they talk to each other on the phone.
They're like motivating each other. And
Yeah, like it's a perfect duo in the industry until it's not. So he plays it so well. I just like seeing what we saw. I literally cannot imagine anybody else doing any of these roles, which is hard.
It's also funny because Daniel Radcliffe never calls out. Like he's so good. You will rarely get an understudy. He like really works hard to be there because he knows the tickets are expensive, and he knows, due to his level of fame, that a lot of people are coming there to see him, so he rarely calls out. But as we're recording this, he's literally out today.
Yeah.
On like a pre-planned vacation. But you literally have 3 chances to see it with somebody else. But otherwise, you know, he is there every day. He'd have to be dying to not show up, I think.
Same with Jonathan Groff. He's very really committed as well. I don't think he's called out. We're recording on April 5th. He has scheduled vacation on like April 16th, 17th. But he has not called out yet. So... Yeah. Unlike Lindsay, who's been out for like 47 performances. She's
pregnant. But also, you know, you're allowed to call out. Like, you should be able to take vacation 100%. From your job. You're allowed to take... Like, this is not a criticism, but it is...
No.
It is...
But it's just interesting when, like, the other two are... Their attendance is...
they're like, we're there. Well, even when we saw Little Shop with Jonathan Groff, we were talking to Tim at Broadway Up Close. We're like, yes, tomorrow we're going to see this. We're like, hoping Jonathan's in. He's good. He's pretty good. He'll be there.
Yeah.
And he was.
On his bike.
He's always on that bike.
Riding his bike.
No.
And then the third... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, no, Daniel Radcliffe, a small man. I mean, short.
So small.
He's doing an accent, too. Like, he's not doing his own accent. He does bring this, like, fun, like, comedic energy. I've never seen him do a character like this before. And I also think it's slightly a bit of a stretch for him. Like, I don't know if he's sang like this before in a show.
He sounds so good.
He sounds really good. He's not gruff, but it suits this character so perfectly. And I know he's so passionate about, you know, the song Franklin Shepherd Inc. and doing it. He talks about how he runs it in the theater every night before he goes on because he wants to make sure it's so perfect. Like, he's such a meticulous actor, and you see that he is so, like, committed to this performance. I think he's such a good foil and such a good contrast to Jonathan Groff as Frank.
He also had said previously that, like, he'd always wanted to do a Sondheim show. And then in the SiriusXM, like, cast album, whatever they did, hosted by Seth Rudetsky, they were asking about other shows, Sondheim shows that they like to do, and Daniel was like, I can't do anything else. This is all I can do.
Like,
so, like,
we found my niche.
Don't ask me to go be in, like, I'm not going to play, what's his name in, like, Sweeney Todd. What's that character's name who, like, Jordan Fisher played?
Not Toby?
No. The older
Toby's the other
character.
Not.
I can't remember. He sings Joanna. But he's like,
yeah.
I could really only do...
Anthony?
Maybe? Something like that. It's probably, yeah. But he's like, I can't do anything else. This is where I peak, and thank you so much.
What other Sondheim show could Daniel Radcliffe be? I only have the first book here, but...
We also haven't seen all of that.
I know.
He could be Paul and Company.
Yeah, he could do... I don't think he's done with patter songs. I think he's over a patter song.
Well, Paul doesn't sing the patter song. Jamie sings the patter song.
Oh, okay. Paul's not big enough for him. I don't know enough about Forum. Yeah, I'm not really seeing a role for him in...
Yeah, he knows. The other thing I will say that he said, which I thought was very
He can age into the narrator in Into the Woods. He can age into it, like in 20 years.
20? More than 20. How old
30.
is he? Like 30-something?
35, maybe? 30, early 30s?
The man that I saw was, like, in his late 70s.
Okay, go on.
But the other thing that I thought was so sweet, and I think this also goes back to what I was saying about their, like, real-life friendship, is that Daniel was like, I can't sometimes, like, get out of it on stage and, like, bring the humanity into it, because sometimes I'll watch certain scenes and I'll see, like, Jonathan off to the side and think, one day this will be the last day that we do this together.
It's emotional singing Our Time, because, like, what if the last time we sing Our Time?
Yeah, so
that's a very me thing to do. Like, not being able to live in the moment because you're living in a different moment.
Well, he was just like, I know that there's going to be that day, and that's going to be, like, the worst day ever, and I sometimes, like, can't think about it, or I will lose my place on stage and just, like, have to walk off. Like, that's what will happen.
He's like, we can't look at each other. Like, oh,
no. Yeah. And then, yeah, the third person in that trio, who is probably giving us the best vocal performance of the three, is just Lindsay Mendez.
Who has a better tone to their voice? Nobody.
Her mixed belt is so beautiful. She is such a stunning singer, so different. I think that's what makes her stand out.
Her voice has, like, character to it.
Yes, and I think something else, it was really interesting. She's obviously very good friends with Seth Rudetsky. They've done many segments together. And she said, you know, for a very long time, she would go into an audition room and they'd be like, you're not right for this. And I think that was, like, very hard for her to hear, trying to get into, like, a career in this industry. And then you see her in this show and you're like, how could anybody else play Mary? Her standout song to me is, what's that song called? Like the Way It Was? No.
Like It Was,
which is literally, like, song 2. Yeah. And then obviously, like, Now You Know is her big moment. Her diction is amazing. Her placement of tone on specific words, like, she's also, like Seth was saying, if you put these notes on a piano, like, she's doing higher things than she needs to be doing. Like, she's also, I'm pretty sure, I think we were saying this when we watched interviews, like when this show was just coming out, like she's checking everyone's pitch on stage.
They call her the unofficial vocal captain of the show.
Yes, like
Guiding with the eyes.
She will correct.
On stage.
Yeah.
She's telling Jonathan,
I think my one critique, which is not a critique of this production, is that we don't get enough Mary
interiority
in general. Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
I want to know more about her internal struggles of loving her best friend. We don't get really any of that. I want to know her relationship with Charlie. Like, I want to know what she does at multiple stages of her career. Like, we don't really know too much about her. So that's like my one critique on this show as a whole.
The show as a whole. Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, similarly to my critique that, you know, it's hard to feel Charlie's absence when you've never met him before in that first scene. I also agree that I wish she was more developed. And I also, it kind of annoys me that our, like, main female character is, like, not like a sad sack, but, like, that that, like, you know, Charlie gets to get married and have his family. Not that's the end all be all. And Frank gets to get married and have this. And she's just kind of stuck in this circumstance. Like, why is our female main character stuck in this one thing and not able to, like, move out of it? And, like, that's part of the tragedy of it. But through a modern lens, which this show is 40 years old, and even based on source material, even older.
Yeah, because it's based on a play.
But it's kind of like, it's based on a play. We haven't even mentioned that. It's based on a Kaufman and Hart play from, I think, the 30s. So, you know, it's hard to look at things through a 2024 lens and be like, well, it should have been like that, because things were different and things were written within different context. But it does bother me in a way that our female main character, is kind of
so unhappy the whole time.
Exactly. And it seems like the men around her are able to live out more full lives than she is. And you maybe wouldn't even, and again, not that getting married or being, like, not that that's the end all be all or the only thing that would lead to her living a full life, but it's also hard because we do have other female characters, but of our core trio, she is the only woman. So if there was another woman there as well, and her circumstance was different, it wouldn't be as striking. But because she is the only one in that core trio, it is a little bit annoying. But we do have, like, the characters of, like, Beth and Gussie, who are experiencing life in different ways and are showing life in ways.
But it is interesting because there's that moment in Opening Doors when they're trying to figure out who will be the woman in their variety show, and it's just like, well, Mary, because, like, she's there, so she's always there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it doesn't matter what happens in her life as long as she's here for my life. That's how I felt about it. Yeah,
like Frank takes her for granted. I think Frank takes everyone for granted. I think that's kind of...
He's, like, as I said, the worst.
No, I know. There's a line in Old Friends. I'm going to look back for Old Friends where I was like, oh, I don't think Frank's a good friend. Which, like, obviously, but...
Oh, he's definitely not.
No. It struck me where I was like, oh, he's just looking for... In his friends, he's just looking for, like, yes men, like, people who are going to enable him. He's not looking for people who are going to, like, call him out and hold him to task in any way. Frank sings, old friends don't make demands on you. And Charlie corrects him and says, should make demands on you. And Frank says, well, don't make demands you can't meet. And Charlie says, well, what's the point of demands you can't meet? What's the point of not, like, pushing each other and asking each other for things and trying for things? And Frank is just looking for a much easier, much more maybe surface level exploration of that. And I was like, oh, there are, like, different pages of this friendship right now.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, the friendships, I mean, there was a point when I think they were truly actually friends, but at this kind of point in the show, he's obviously a very lonely person, and these two people fill that lonely void, but he doesn't actually care. He's like, don't challenge me. I don't want you to challenge me. I just want you to be here for me. And but that's like that scene when he's sitting at the piano singing.
Which is right after this.
Yeah, so he's singing and they're like, it's someone's, I think it's like Evelyn something is happening at a bar, or like Mary something is happening at a bar. No, and it's like, okay, we're going out. And he's
like, we want to take you out to, like, cheer you up after you come home from this boat. Like, we're going to, they brought Frank Jr. to
Yes.
to Evelyn to hang with like Charlie's
The real
kid.
star of
the real star, Frank Jr. And they're like, we're going out to a bar, like, to see each other. We haven't seen each other in such a long time. And then he's like, okay, I'll meet you there. And then he never goes because
he
Gussie
ends up
shows up.
sleeping with Gussie that night.
Yes, because Gussie like leaves her husband that night, and he never goes. And like I think that's the moment like that irreparably damages that.
Oh,
that friendship.
100%. I 100% agree.
When he goes up the stairs and doesn't walk out the other way, you're like, I can't believe
he's a very selfish character.
I can't believe he just did that when he walks up those stairs.
He's a very selfish character who unfortunately had friends that just were like, for a while of like, yeah, Frank, whatever you say, Frank, we'll be there for you. Mm-hmm. And Mary more than Charlie. Yeah. And yes, all this to say that like Mary's character, I agree, but however, sung by the musical stylings of Lindsay Mendez,
Lindsay is
acted by the whatever of Lindsay Mendez, she is giving, I know she's it's not super recent Tony winner, but I'm going to say recent Tony winner. But I know she's a recent Tony winner, but I really do think that this is her.
For such a different role, too. A revival, though.
So good.
Well. So
this season is so interesting.
She's a rough season.
I don't know.
Okay, let's rapid fire. I feel like we need to talk about Crystal Joy Brown, who I also think is stunning in this show. I obviously knew about the main three characters, but I really did not know about the character of Gussie.
Beautiful costumes.
Is amazing costumes. She is so best. The costumes in this whole show are really
gorgeous,
kind of great.
So good.
But is it
the blob scene specifically?
When they're in the black and white, the black and white.
Amazing.
I have a note on that because in that scene, everyone on stage, including Frank and including Beth, is wearing black and white except for Charlie and Mary, who are in like brown and like warm tones.
But that's because they didn't tell them to wear that.
Yes, like that. But
don't
also
you remember? They're tell Mary like I might have it. Gussie says like I could have something for you to change into or something like that.
No,
like,
she spills on her.
That's the best.
She spills on her. No, I really think like it's like an unspoken memo. Like they're just out of the loop. They're so different from this other world that they're entering into. It's not any like formal dress code, but it's like
Charlie's in the same corduroy pants.
Yes, like they're just so out of step with this world that they're being brought into, and Frank is already like so much more primed to kind of be absorbed in this world, and they're like, whoa, I don't know about that. Yeah. Which is why like that costume contrast is Gussie wearing that beautiful like backless maxi dress in the opening scene, that Frank.
It's
so beautiful. And then she wears it again for bows because it's like, yes, this is the best dress. This is your best look.
So good.
This is your best look.
I agree. I knew nothing about the character of Gussie because, again, we barely listened to that cast recording, and she has so much that's off cast recording. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of scenes with her and Frank. There's a lot of just, like, her presence on stage that you obviously wouldn't know just by listening to it. She's giving an amazing performance. You put her as a nomination in your way too early.
I really think because Lindsay's in lead, and I think that frees up a spot to me. I mean, featured is always kind of chaotic, but I think that frees up a spot. I think the show is so loved. I really think, and I think she's doing like a lot of work. She's doing so much in this show. I think there's a spot for her. I also think Katie Rose Clark is doing wonderful things in this show. She has less to do. Again, to talk about female characters in this show, they are always kind of like as a foil to what the male characters are doing. And I think that's for Gussie. And I also think, especially for Beth, she is there as, you know, Frank's wife, then ex-wife. And because this story is told through Frank's perspective, kind of when she's out of Frank's life, she's out of the story as well. So she's not in the beginning and she's not at the end. Like, she's very much like, kind of in the center chunk of the show. And once they get divorced, we never see her again. I hope she's enjoying her time backstage, scrolling her phone.
She said, did you hear her say that? Yeah. She said she doesn't enter for the first 45 minutes, and she's like, you know, I'm a mom of 3, so I enjoy scrolling. But also interesting,
is she in Merrily We Roll Along, the song? Is she on stage then? She must be.
Maybe she's singing from backstage. I'm not sure.
Because I know, like,
I don't know.
I know, like, Mary and Charlie are on stage and singing that song. I wonder.
Maybe,
I don't remember.
As like an introduction. I don't remember either. The other thing I will say about her is that she is like a high soprano. She's a previous Galinda. Mm-hmm. This is quite lower in her register, which is beautiful. When she sings Not a Day Goes By, she sounds so good. There's like a cry to her voice in that. But then you do get her like a good soprano when they do that like variety show number, and when she's auditioning for the part, when she's singing
Bobby and
Who Wants
June
to
and
Live
Jack.
in. Well, but specifically in the and they're like up a tone. So it's like
the way Jonathan Groff says that's so funny. Up a tone. Like,
he
says it's so funny.
And then the real star of the show is the third person that you're gonna talk about.
Well, I want to say one more thing about Katie Rose Clark. I think adding to the chemistry, Lindsay Mendez and Katie Rose Clark did Elphaba and Glinda together in Wicked, so it adds to that history that these characters, that these people have with each other.
It also adds to the like fighting for one man. At
so
the
interesting.
Same time.
So interesting. The third person I want to talk about, maybe there's two people. The third person I want to talk about is Reg Rogers playing Joe, who I think is so good, so funny.
He's so good. He doesn't have that much
delivering.
to do, but he's so good.
No, but he like eats up every moment he has on the stage.
His best moment is in Opening Doors. Obviously. He's so good. I know that he's like Daniel Radcliffe's favorite person in the cast. I think he based his New York accent after him.
Well, I can't remember what interview it was anymore, but they said, what other character would you like to play? And he's like, Joe. He's like, but I only want to do Reg playing Joe. Like, it would be an impression of him playing Joe.
Yeah,
that's all I want to do. My actual favorite performance of the whole show was Max Rackenberg as Frank Jr.
Sweet. He was so cute.
So little. He sings 2 lines in one of the transitions. They're so little. I swear, I thought he was 4 years old. I think they're 6. I think they're 6 or 7.
Yeah.
But they're little. I think it's Max Rackenberg and Brady Wagner, who are kind of the permanent Frank Juniors, and they kind of bring other kids in as needed. Because they're really little. Like, they're really little. So cute. They don't do that much, but when he was on stage, I'm like, I can't believe he's walking up the stairs by himself. I can't. Like, there's no banister. I can't believe they're just letting that kid walk up the stage by himself. And I'm sure his handler is just like right there, ready to grab him whenever he enters and exits and kind of pushes them on. Sure. I am sure that's what's happening. But I was like, wow, a lot to do, a lot of responsibility. And he
loves
bows
Daniel Radcliffe.
He's like,
Dan is my best friend.
That's my best friend. They're so cute.
Also, while we're here, shout out to this ensemble. They're not doing that much, but when they are on stage, they're doing the most. And it's like so exciting. Everyone sounds incredible. Vocally. They are moving here for these transitions. The ensemble standout moment is the Blob, which is not on that original cast recording. It's in this production. And yeah, the transitions, I think they sound really good on them.
In here, in this book, Stephen Sondheim, I think he was really obsessed with, he had much more detailed transitions in the original show, or in the original inception of the show. I don't even think it made it to Broadway, but they were much more, I think originally they viewed this show as much more of an exploration of this specific time period. So they had all these historical references as to what were happening in these years, in these transitions. And then they realized we need to focus in on Frank. We need to focus in, and so it's not so much about like what's happening in the world or in America over this time, it's what's happening with Frank. So the transitions are kind of all very similar instead of these very, very detailed historical references. But I think he was so obsessed with writing them that they're all in this book. He's like, they are.
One of my favorite lyrics from the transitions is "Dreams don't die, so keep an eye on your dreams," and that's very obviously written for Frank.
Yeah, that it's very the transitions now kind of are maybe an inner conscious, very much more personal, much more pointed, as opposed to just like a general world view. But it's funny, he's like, no one ever heard these, but they're here for you right now. Read them.
Yes,
they're my favorite part.
Another person that I want to quickly talk about, we haven't talked about her at all here, and that's director Maria Friedman.
Absolutely.
Who
is she, Tara?
Listen to this podcast, you know that I was obsessed with her because she was the narrator in the Joseph, I think in the West End. She's specifically the narrator in the Joseph VHS that my family owns.
Famously, Johnny Osmond.
Wanted to be her like when I grew up.
I feel like I told you this. I was like, did you know? Did you know?
And I found out like maybe after we bought tickets, and I literally was like, There's no way. But Maria has previously been a Mary in Merrily. She obviously directed this production when it was in the UK like 11 years ago. And then kind of brought that whole same style looking production to Broadway. It's the same production. What I thought was really interesting, what I learned today, is that Seth was saying that she produced that cast recording and directors do not do that. So she had such a clear vision for how she wanted that to sound as well. And I do think it's one of the best mastered cast recordings. When you listen to this in order, everything flows so seamlessly into the other, specifically as we get into that Frank and also the transition that goes directly into the Blob. It's so good. Like the way that it's mastered is so good. But I think that part of the reason, on top of every other little thing that we've said in this episode, that this show is so good is because of her. She really is like the steward of this show. She is keeping it safe. Like she is protecting it. She's like holding it in her hands and just, it's interesting to hear like Danny Radcliffe talk about it. And they're like, what did you know about the show? And he's like, to me, it's always worked because the first time I ever saw it was that 2013 production that we're doing now. So to me, that was the first time I saw it. And it's a credit to her that for him to be like, always a wonderful, great show. All three of them believe in her so much. And I think that's also such an amazing thing and something that makes your show so successful is when your cast and your creative team have such a good relationship. It seems like there's so much trust that she has in her cast and then vice versa. I wouldn't be surprised if she possibly won the Tony Award this season. It's gonna be interesting. There's so many shows this season. I know we've kind of talked about songs like throughout this, but is there anything else song-wise that you want to talk about here? Should we pick a favorite song? Sure. That's really hard, though. I actually maybe regret that. I mean, I think the obvious answer is Old Friends. Oh, really? But also Our Time. Our Time. I was gonna say Growing Up. I mean, a strong third. and that's actually something interesting to share. That was not in the original Broadway production. That entered in 1985 because they thought, we need to hear Frank's inner thoughts. He's really unlikable. We do not like this man. We need to have this like heartfelt moment with him. So that original production in 1981 did not have that kind of look into his inner life. Well, doesn't that song start with him saying, like, Frank's old friends keep reminding him? Yeah. Or something like that? Because right after Old Friends, it's that same scene where they've gone off to the bar. They're like, we're waiting for you. And he never shows up. He sings Growing Up, and then Gussie shows up. And she's like, I don't know. Hi. Life is not hello. What you want. And yeah, I think the most iconic song from the show is Opening Doors. True. To me. Also I'll say Merrily We Roll Along, open with a bang. Like, just the way... This is the thing. Like, we've just listed, like, 8 songs here. There's no duds. No duds. But the way that the ensemble is layered over it and the way it keeps coming back. Every transition, it sets the tone. It's funny. Like, the show doesn't... Like, the story doesn't start till, like, 10 minutes in because you've got that long overture and then Merrily We Roll Along, which is, again, just tone setting. And then you're, like, straight into that Frank. What's also so exciting about this music specifically, I think I say this literally every time we hear these kind of instruments, but we're getting brass, heavy brass. It sounds so good. The trumpets, the horns, like it is, that overture is so, like it literally just gets you excited for the rest of the show. It's incredible. It's, as you said, one of the best overtures of all time. I would go just listen to the overture and leave. Like it's so good. I think it's amazing how it goes through every song. It's just a really well orchestrated show. But there's something about brass that really lends itself, I think, to the time period, but also the tone of these songs. And it's funny because I think sometimes when you think of like brass and heavy instruments, you're like, oh, you can't have like a ballad. You can. It shows you that like it's not just a like in your face instrument. It can be toned back and beautiful as well. So the music is really good and so distinct to Stephen Sondheim's
sound. I remember when I went to New York in the summer of 2022, it was a trip to see Company like a week before it closed. But that Friday night I got there, saw Into the Woods, which was running at the time, and then the Saturday night saw Company. So back to back, these Stephen Sondheim shows, 20 years apart. And I was with my mom both times, and we were at Company at intermission, and she's like, wow, like, Stephen Sondheim. And I was like, yeah, I know. For me, he just has this way of, writing to explore human experience. These shows are high concept, low concept, but all of them are about people and relationships and how they react. And that, again, like I said before, that is my favorite thing to see represented in art. And I just think no matter what, even if it's fairy tale characters or it's writers or, I don't know, a murderous barber, like, it's always just about, like, the humanity at the core of the characters. And I think he does such a good job at that. But then also it takes actors and performers and directors and creatives to, like, understand that and like, give it the craft that it deserves. And I think this production has really, like, every piece is working.
This is an elite production. It is a high caliber production. And that's why I think when you break it down in the way that we've just spent the last like hour and a half breaking this down, it makes sense that at the helm of it was someone so creative like Sondheim. This kind of ends our like Sondheim journey. I don't know that we're seeing anything. Oh, I might see Sweeney Todd in like 2 weeks, but like other than that,
maybe.
I don't think there's anything.
Yeah, I don't know. We kind of had a Sondheim essence.
We
around
did.
His death a little bit. Something we didn't talk about, but kind of we were waiting to see the Toronto production of Merrily from Yes Theatre Sudbury at Crow's, and it just never happened, never came to fruition. And that was going to be our first Merrily experience. And then, again, it didn't happen, and we ended up seeing
the pandemic did happen.
The pandemic happened, then it was going to come back around again, and then it got canceled, because I remember we were emailing. We're like, hey, we're really interested in seeing this, talking to the cast, blah, 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 blah. And they never responded to us, and then 2 days later, they're like, this is canceled. Speaking
of that, before we close this out, the movie is in the works. We've been talking about this off and on for like, I don't know, years. Months. The latest that I don't know that we've updated on air is that Blake Jenner has been replaced by Paul Mescal. Have we updated this?
I think we have spoken about this. Because I think I got confused about who was playing who. I thought Paul Mescal was playing Charlie and Ben Platt was playing Frank, which makes no sense. Sorry, that was my fault.
But I also believe that we didn't have this conversation on air and we had it at the stage door with the people behind us.
Oh, did we? Yeah, I think you might be actually totally right. You might be totally right.
Final thoughts before we rate it.
Sometimes a show just hits you at the absolute perfect moment in your life, and it is the perfect production. I don't know. When I say perfect production, I don't mean it's perfect, but I mean it was perfect for me at that time. It's funny because, yeah, this show came out 40 years ago, but we kind of have no concept of that, and going in fresh was like a gift to me. So I really had such an absolute wonderful time at this show. I really thought this is a really special production of a special show that I know so many people do connect to. Obviously, it has had a very storied history, but I think they kind of nailed it with this one. I don't know if it'll ever be nailed in quite that way again, but I do think this production is very special. I am going to give this show 10 out of 10.
Wow, I didn't think you were gonna do it. I didn't think you were gonna do it.
It's hard. It's hard because 10 out of 10 magnets that I had to buy at intermission. It's hard. It's hard to give something a perfect score because is anything perfect? No. Is the show perfect? No. But it was perfect for me. And so what else can I give a 10 out of 10? I can't withhold the 10 out of 10 forever. I gave a 3 last week. Like
no, I think it was higher.
Was it a 4?
Because it was Gatsby last episode, so I think it was a 5? 4?
Was it a 5?
I think it was a 4.
I don't remember. What did I give Aladdin? A 3?
I think Aladdin might have been higher than Gatsby and Back to the Future. Maybe we should like rework that.
No, Back to the Future. I think that was a 3. That was a 3.
Yeah. I completely agree. I don't, again, as you've heard us say this entire episode, as I've said on previous episode, I've never felt this way about anything in a theater ever. This is not only the best show I saw last year, it's one of the best shows I've ever seen ever. This is a very, it's a very special show. And for that, I want to keep my memories how they are. I am also giving this, and I will never give this out again.
Well, never again, Tara. Have we been too effusive?
A 10 out of 10. Posters in frames to hang on the wall. Again, it's not perfect. You've heard us criticize it on this show, but I don't know anything else at this current stage in what I've seen will be able to get that coveted 10 out of 10 perfect.
It's hard.
It's a perfect musical to me in this way. I understand that it's not perfect. Don't come for us. But to me, this was perfect.
Yeah. Do you think, now I know we've finished talking about the show, do you think it would ever work in the correct order, like chronological order? No, I agree.
I think the reason that it's so special is because it's reverse.
Like you're like excavating.
It would be too much plot given.
It would be too straightforward.
Yeah. And there's no mystery.
Like, who cares? Who cares about this?
You're trying to figure out what, like, the whole show you're trying to figure out what went wrong. And if you're given that in the chronological order, it's not as interesting to me.
Like, things are so much more devastating because, which we already said, but like you see them in
reverse.
Because you see the younger versions do things that the older versions have been already impacted by. Like, you have that emotional connection to it. Yeah, I agree. Also, I think if it was in chronological order, it would have been written completely differently. Like, if that was the plan originally, it would be written so differently.
You can't just turn this show backwards and play it through and hope it works out. It just wouldn't work.
Yeah, like, it would just be not silly, but it would just...
But even
if that was the plan... If that was the plan, then I think they would have written these songs differently and structured it differently. And like, I don't think you could just flop the order of them and it would work. I think it would just kind of be a little bit boring almost. Like. But
yeah, like legitimately, I don't know when I'm going to give a 10 out of 10 again.
Although it's hard. It's a tough one.
It's just funny because I think we both had said we would never do this. And we
I don't know.
Did it.
Who else is writing musicals like this right now? Do you know what I mean?
We haven't seen Sunset Boulevard. We will be seeing it. We haven't seen
Okay,
Cabaret.
sorry, but like Sunset Boulevard's not going to be the...
It might be.
I think I'll enjoy Sunset Boulevard, but I just don't think structurally...
No, I agree, but I also don't know that much about it, and I'm going to
It's a little bit more... It's a little bit more camp. But then this Jamie Lloyd production, I think, not pulls the camp out, but it's like... It's almost like what Christopher Nolan did for Batman. I feel like Jamie Lloyd is doing for Sunset Boulevard. Do you know what I mean?
Like I said on a previous episode, he is the Ivo Van Hove of the West End.
But Ivo Van Hove is like...
He's doing a Jesus Christ Superstar in Amsterdam.
I know, and we're gonna miss it. And we missed it.
We are gonna miss it. Anyway... That's our thoughts on Merrily We Roll Along. This show is on stage until July. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but it did extend. We will be watching to see what happens tomorrow for the Tony nominations, and we will be talking about the Tony nominations in our next episode. But before then, it's now time for our Obsession of the Week.
Okay, so a few weeks ago, not too long ago, Tara and I had the opportunity to see a dance show here in the city of Toronto. Message in a Bottle.
Wow.
It played here in Toronto. March 20th.
Give us a 60-second plot summary.
Give us a 60-second plot summary. Okay. We have a family of 5. Mom, dad, 2 brothers, a sister. They're living their wonderful life. The son falls in love. The oldest son falls in love, gets married. What happens? Civil war in their country. They have to become refugees and leave their country for safety. And over the course of the show, the father dies, the mother dies, the siblings are all separate. Well, the brother is separated from his wife, the siblings are all separated from each other, and go through struggles and turmoil and eventually find peace in where they are. It was kind of unclear to me whether they found each other again or if they just found their peace separately, but
Agreed.
you know, they found, you know, a life that they would be happy living, whether that's with friends or a relationship, or they found their spouse again. It is all told 100% through dance, through contemporary and hip-hop and break dancing. It is told through the music of Sting, both his solo work and his music with the Police. I have my program right here. Honestly,
it's also re-orchestrated by Alex Lacamoire.
Orchestra by Alex Lacamoire. I looked it up the night before. We got tickets to this the night before. I can't even talk about how we got them. But so the exciting part about this, it is playing at New York City Center. It's kind of done a tour. It's from a UK dance company called Zoo Nation. The choreographer is Katie Prince. It has been kind of doing a North American tour, and it's ending up at the New York City Center starting April 30th to May 12th. So tomorrow, if you're listening to this on day of record, it's there for 2 weeks. I went in with very medium expectations, like really kind of low. Not low, but just
I went in
like,
with zero expectations.
we'll see what this is, and actually had a wonderful time. I thought it was
great.
Quite good. It was very moving. I cried when they danced to So Lonely. I was quite moved by it. I think, to me, growing up as a dancer, I always get so excited to see shows where dance is the center, where dance is used as the storytelling tool and not as the accessory and not as just backup for the stars, for being able to tell story through movement. And it's hard sometimes because there's no dialogue at all. It's all through movement, and the lyrics are not necessarily perfectly matching up to what the story is telling. It is all through feeling and through visual. And I think they were doing some really beautiful things, and I think using of like hip-hop choreography, break dancing. I saw like locking and whacking in there, like popping, like so many different cool things that I was really excited by, and I had a really wonderful time. My one disappointment is that it is on a track and there's not live music, so a little criticism, but I was so excited to get to see a pure dance show that is not just the National Ballet. We have wonderful ballet here in the city, but also this contemporary show, I think just really, really fun. And I was kind of inspired to see it because, as we know, this Broadway season, Illinois is kind of like the last minute entry, which is also a dance show, storytelling told completely through dance. It's a Sufjan Stevens album, Illinois. It's an album I know. I've known the song Chicago for years and years and years. Not to become about Illinois. Can I tell you the story about how I heard the song Chicago for the first time?
Sure.
This is a very random story, but I was reading this book, and it was about these characters who are reuniting. It was a sequel, and it was about these characters who were reuniting after they'd been apart for years. They were in love, and then something traumatic happened to her, and she left. She needed to move on. And then a few years later, he sees her again, and they spend this whole night walking through New York City and talking. And they spend the whole night just speaking and talking and telling each other about their lives and trying to, you know, put together what has happened and why she left. And at one point, he kind of becomes so distraught and they separate, and he stops this man on the street and he says, "Can I have your iPod?" Okay. And the man's like, "Okay." This is slightly old, and the character's kind of famous, so people are like willing to give him the iPod. So he gives them the iPod, and he goes in, puts on a playlist, starts listening to songs. He's skipping through, and a song that comes on, Chicago, and it's just a book. So I was like, well, I have to listen to it now that the character is listening to it. And I listened to it, and I fell in love with the song. And so when I heard they were doing this dance show, which is also co-produced by TO Live, the City of Toronto itself, so it will eventually also become to Meridian Hall, but not before it goes to Broadway, which I think is kind of rude, especially because if my tax money paid for this, I want to see this.
Yeah.
So I'm so excited that another dance show choreographed by Justin Peck is making it to Broadway, and I love when dance gets to take center stage and is not just kind of the background star. So if you get a chance to see Message in a Bottle, whether it's in New York City, it's going, I think, to Philadelphia right after, so another opportunity. And then that looks like it, but or if you're in the UK, and you can check out Zoo Nation, the dance company that put this show together, I would highly recommend, because I had a really wonderful time. I thought it was so well done, so well put together, really moving, really excellent.
Yeah, it was really good. I was pleasantly surprised.
I know, very shocking. Illinois has live music, which is why I was like,
it's on Broadway.
Wish
and can be considered a new musical.
Because it has live music.
Yes. My obsession this week, also this happened a few weeks ago, and these are all on YouTube. I feel like we're probably, hopefully, back in the stage of events happening in New York, and then if they're for charity, they're streaming them on YouTube. Broadway Backwards recently happened, and I have recently watched the performance of Listen, which is sung by Jordan Fisher, which if you've listened to this podcast, you know that I don't love Jordan Fisher. I love his voice, but I don't love Jordan Fisher. But the reason why I love this performance is because it's also signed by an actor, and his name is John McGinty. Basically, long story short, the premise is that this character is off at university and he's deaf, and his parents find out that he's dating Jordan Fisher's character, and his mom kind of says, like, this can't be like another affliction, so he sings Listen at her while this actor is signing.
A full concept.
It is so powerful. Jordan sounds amazing. This actor is like really using their whole body in this sign language, and I just think it's so interesting. We had talked about this, oh my god, almost like 3 years ago now, the Deaf West production of Spring Awakening that we were both like so obsessed with.
I think this was 2020. 4 years ago.
So 4 years ago. And I just think that when you add an element of ASL, it automatically brings in the emotion, and it just makes things more interesting. Something that I thought was super interesting about this performance, because it's very high quality. It's shot on a very high quality camera. I can see the non-hearing actor look at Jordan Fisher to read his lips to make sure that he is doing the correct signing, whereas like watching a terrible quality bootleg of Spring Awakening, like, you couldn't always see that stuff.
Sure.
But it's just interesting that like how two actors have to work so closely with each other to have both of their best performances. I haven't really seen anything else from this year's Broadway Backwards. I know they're slowly like rolling stuff out on their YouTube page, but this one was really a standout. It's very emotional, and yeah, I highly recommend it. So that's my obsession this week. That's our very long episode on Merrily We Roll Along. And as I said, our next episode will be the Tony nominations. We are splitting this episode in two like we did last year, because I'm sure there is so much to talk about. As you know, there are 10 million musicals in contention for nomination this year.
I think more interesting to talk about what gets left out. What gets left off.
Yes.
I think that might be the interesting conversation this year.
And I also feel like we should maybe like really go back and look at our predictions and see where we went so wrong. Because at the time of record of the Way Too Early, a couple of shows hadn't even been announced.
Like Illinois.
Like
Didn't
Illinois.
even know.
Exactly. Like,
also,
like Stereophonic that will sweep the Tony Awards this year.
I think that we actually did know about Stereophonic, because I think we screamed when we realized it's going to win Best Score. We're like, can't believe this is about to win Best Score. I just don't know what else.
But I think it's interesting to look back at that, because I think some of our predictions on shows and how successful they were going to be has actually completely changed. So I actually think at this current moment, when you're listening to this episode, the best musical category is wide open right now. So it's going to be so interesting to see what happens in a couple weeks.
And also, you know, Cabaret is starting. Everything's open by the time you're listening to this, but Cabaret is open now, and, you know, I think maybe we underestimated it, but we shall see.
I didn't. Gail Rankin was my best actress winner, so maybe I didn't
remember who I picked. Maybe Lindsay, but
Wait. Yeah, Lindsay's not in lead. Lindsay's in featured.
Is Lindsay not in lead?
No.
I don't remember.
She's not.
She was in lead at Drama Desk.
She is... I'm pulling up the spreadsheet. She is in... featured.
I'm looking.
Oh. Am I wrong? No, she's in featured.
Oh, she is featured. Okay, never mind. Okay, well,
so
that negates something I said earlier today about Crystal Joy Brown. But it's interesting, because at the drama desk, she was lead.
Yeah, the ruling came out.
She was lead.
The ruling
I was just reading the ruling. So interesting.
Anyway, we'll get more into that in our Tony nomination episodes. But before then, you can listen to all of our other episodes by subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a comment.
And you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Off2BOA Podcast with the number 2, and on TikTok at Off2 Broadway, also with the number 2.
And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.